Ever think about how some of the biggest moments in history, like, they might have happened because of something totally random, like a complete accident?
Yeah, do a wild thought, right?
Totally. And today, we're going to dive into that idea that history, well, it isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's shaped by unexpected twists and turns, what we call flukes.
A fluke.
Yeah.
It's like something small. Doesn't seem like a big deal at first, but then bam, it has this huge impact, on how things turn out. Like throws a wrench in the whole idea that history is just this predictable thing.
Right, right. And to really dig into this, we're taking a deep dive into an episode of the American History Hit podcast.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's good. They talked to this guy, Brian Klass. He wrote a book called Fluke, Chance, Chaos, and Why Everything We Do Matters.
So,
He makes a pretty strong case that these flukes, these accidents, they've had a way bigger impact on, well, on shaping the world than we realized.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, think
Oh,
about it.
no, right.
There's got to be tons of examples throughout history where like one tiny thing happens and then boom, everything changes.
Exactly.
And one way class explains this is through chaos theory. You familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
So it's this idea, right, that even tiny changes in these big complex systems like think societies, ecosystems, even the weather, those tiny changes can create massive results and total unpredictable too.
Oh, okay. So like the butterfly effect, that like a butterfly flapping its wings in one place can cause a hurricane somewhere else.
Exactly. It sounds crazy. I know. But those seemingly random, unconnected events, they're actually linked, right? Just in ways we can't always see. So, class, he's arguing that history is full of these butterfly effects, where one tiny incident, it sets off this whole chain reaction leading to massive changes, like even the birth of countries or the fall of empires.
Wow. Okay. To kick things off, let's jump into some really interesting examples from American history.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'll look at how a shortage of trees in Britain actually helped to spark the American Revolution.
That's a new one.
Yeah, and then how a box of cigars might have changed the whole course of the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
Crazy, right? And then even how a simple vacation to Japan, well, how it played a role in deciding where to drop the atomic bomb.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
I know, it's wild.
It's like you never really know what tiny detail is going to end up changing the world.
Right. It makes you think, huh? So each of these stories, I think, they show us how events that seem totally random, totally unrelated, can actually come together and create these massive turning points. It forces us to rethink, the traditional stories we hear about history and consider how much chance, how much coincidence has really shaped the world we live in today.
For sure. It makes you question everything, doesn't it?
So, all right, let's start with the American Revolution. Now, most of us learned about the Boston Tea Party, right?
Mm.
The fight for independence and all that. But I bet most people have never heard about the role trees played in all of this.
Yeah, you don't hear that one too often. Trees.
Trees. It's a weird one.
It really is.
But it's actually crucial to understanding the whole thing, the growing tension between Britain and the American colonies. And to fully appreciate this, we need to go back in time for a minute to 18th century Britain. Okay, so they were this naval superpower. But they had a problem.
What's that?
Not enough wood. Not enough wood to build all the ships they needed.
Makes sense. You can't be a superpower without a navy, and you can't build ships without wood. Where are they going to find all that lumber?
Exactly. And that's where America came in, those vast, untouched forests in America. Well, they were seen as the solution to Britain's shipbuilding problem. But, that solution, it came with a big cost for the colonists. The king started demanding that the best trees, like the really top quality stuff, had to be set aside, reserved just for the Royal Navy. And, this often meant putting his needs above the needs of the colonists, the people who actually lived there and relied on those forests.
So the colonists weren't too happy about that.
I'd say not.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. It's their land, their trees.
Right. Imagine that. You're a colonist trying to build your life, build a home, and suddenly the king is telling you which trees you can and can't use. I mean, it's not hard to imagine that causing some resentment, some serious tension.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So what happened?
Well, all that simmering tension, it finally boiled over in what's called the Pine Tree Riot. Have you heard of this?
The Pine Tree Riot, I can't say that I have, rings a bell, but
It doesn't get a lot of attention in the history books, but it was a key turning point. It showed just how far the British were willing to go,
mm,
to control the colonies, control their resources, and it also showed how fiercely the colonists were willing to push back to fight for what they believed in.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. So what exactly happened during this Pine Tree Riot?
So it all went down in New Hampshire in 1772. Basically, a group of colonists, they got fed up and attacked a royal official. This guy was, trying to enforce the king's rules about these white pine trees.
White Pines.
Yeah, apparently those were like the prime lumber for shipbuilding back then. Super valuable. So naturally, they were a big point of contention between the colonists and the crown. So this riot, the Pine Tree Riot, while it might seem small compared to, the big battles and stuff that came later, it was a powerful symbol of colonial
Oh,
defiance.
I bet. It's like, we're not going to take this anymore. These are our trees.
Exactly. And it really highlights how this conflict, this fight over trees, it was about way more than just lumber.
Right. It was a statement.
Yeah, it was symbolic,
Yeah.
of the growing divide between the colonists and the British crown. It showed how much things had changed.
So the Pine Tree Riot, this little known uprising over trees, it was a big step on the road to the American
Oh,
Revolution.
absolutely. I mean, think about it. We always hear about the Boston Tea Party, but this happened 5 years earlier.
Wow, I never knew that.
It was like this early warning sign that things were about to get real.
Makes you wonder if maybe the revolution would have happened anyway, even without the Tea Party.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, you think about it. It's like that first crack in a dam, maybe small at first, but it signals a much bigger problem. And when we talk about chaos theory, right? This fight over trees in a far off colony, well, it ends up having this ripple effect that contributes to the birth of a whole new nation. That's pretty incredible.
It really is. I mean, I guess every revolution has to start somewhere, and sometimes it's in the most unexpected places.
And sometimes it's about trees. Who would have thought, right?
Right. It's like something out of I don't know, a children's book or something, the revolution that started with trees.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show, history is not just a straight line, it's a tapestry. A complex tapestry with threads of coincidence, human choices, unintended consequences. It makes you appreciate how those seemingly small, insignificant moments can actually set in motion forces that reshape the entire world.
I love that. A tapestry of history. That's a great way to put it. Okay, so we've seen how trees played this surprising role in the American Revolution. Now let's move on to our next historical fluke, the story of three cigars and how they might have changed the entire Civil War.
Okay, 3 cigars. I'm all ears.
You and me both.
Okay.
So this story is the perfect example of how, chance encounters and individual choices, they can have these massive consequences. And it all revolves around a Union soldier, a Corporal Barton W. Mitchell, and something he found, something pretty ordinary, while he was taking a break from the fighting.
Okay, this is already sounding good. Set the scene for me. Where are we in the Civil War? And what was Corporal Mitchell doing when he stumbled onto this historical fluke?
Okay, so picture this. It's September 1862. The war's raging. Corporal Mitchell, he's a soldier in the 27th Indiana Regiment. He's with his unit near Frederick, Maryland. They're getting ready for what will become the Battle of Antietam, one of the bloodiest battles in American history. Brutal. And as Mitchell's taking a break, he spots something lying on the ground. A piece of paper with 3 cigars wrapped in it.
Okay, 3 cigars wrapped in paper. Seems harmless enough. What's so special about that?
Well, it turns out those cigars were wrapped in something way more important than just some old paper. It was a copy of the Confederate Army's battle plans, like their whole strategy.
Hold on, seriously.
Seriously, can you imagine? This was huge, like potentially game-changing intelligence for the Union Army.
Yeah, talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right, talk about luck. It's almost too good to be true. Finding the enemy's whole battle strategy just lying around. I mean, did they just drop it?
Yeah, I know. But I mean, how do you even know it's the real deal? What if it's a fake?
Exactly. I mean, that's got to be the first thought, right? Is this a trap? And that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, how so?
Because the Union commanders, they had the same thought. They're looking at this and thinking, okay, is this legit or are the Confederates trying to trick us?
Right, high stakes.
Totally. And that's where this element of chance, like pure luck, comes back into play in the most amazing way.
All right, I gotta know, how did they figure out if these battle plans were real?
So the plans were signed by this Confederate officer, R.H. Chilton. And here's the kicker. Get this. The Union Army, they had an officer, Colonel Samuel Pittman. Before the war, get this, he worked as a bank teller
A bank teller.
in Detroit. And guess what?
Yeah.
As a bank teller, he processed tons of checks. And many of those checks were signed by, wait for it, R.H. Chilton. He knew that signature like the back of his hand.
You're kidding. What are the chances of that? It's like something out of a movie.
It's nuts. So here you have it, right? This random job from a guy's past life becomes the key to proving the Confederate battle plans are real.
I mean, that's got to be one of the craziest coincidences in history.
Totally. It's almost too perfect to believe. But it really happened. And because Colonel Pittman was there, able to verify those plans, the Union Army was able to adjust their strategy. And a lot of historians think that's one of the main reasons they won at Antietam.
Wow. Antietam. That was a major turning point, right?
Absolutely. It's considered a Union victory, but it was incredibly costly for both sides. So many lives lost. But it also led to Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. It's huge.
Yeah. It's hard to overstate how important that battle was.
Right. And so, I mean, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Like the fate of the nation, maybe even the whole future of slavery, it could have hinged on those 3 cigars and some guy's past life as a bank teller.
Whoa. I mean, it's a mind-blowing thought, right? We can't say for sure what would happen if those plans hadn't been found. But yeah, it's definitely possible that the whole outcome of the war, the impact on America, on society, it all could have been very different.
That one seemingly random event could have changed everything. It's mind-boggling. And it really drives home the point that Brian Klaas is making in his book. History's full of these flukes, these crazy moments where chance and human choice collide, and they shape everything in ways we can never predict or fully understand.
Both amazing and like a little scary when you think about it.
Totally. Okay, we've gone from trees to cigars, and now we're going to Japan. For our next historical fluke, that is. And this one, it involves, well, probably the biggest decision of World War II, the decision to drop the atomic bomb. But what I find really interesting is how a simple vacation ended up playing a role in that decision.
A vacation. Okay, I'm listening.
I think you'll like this one. So this story is all about Henry Stimson. He was the U.S. Secretary of War during World War II, so obviously he was a key player in deciding whether to use the atomic bomb. But here's the thing. A trip he took years before the war, like almost 20 years earlier, well, that trip ended up having a huge impact on that decision.
Wow. Okay, you got to tell me more about this trip. Where did he go? And how did it end up influencing such a major world-changing event?
So back in 1926, way before the war, Stimson took a vacation to Japan. And he visited Kyoto. You know Kyoto.
Yeah, sure. It's like the cultural heart of Japan, right?
Yeah.
All those temples and gardens and stuff.
Exactly. Beautiful city, super historic. And Stimson, he was totally blown away by it. He even called it a sacred city and talked about its artistic and spiritual value.
Yeah, I can see how a place like Kyoto would leave a mark on someone. The history, the
I
beauty.
know, right? And for Stimson, that personal experience, that connection he felt with Kyoto, well, it came back in a big way years later when the U.S. was trying to decide where to drop the bomb.
Okay, yeah, I see where this is going.
So as we get into World War II, the U.S. is developing this incredibly powerful weapon, right? The atomic bomb. It's like nothing the world has ever seen before. And as the war is coming to an end, they face this massive decision, like a world-altering decision, where to use it.
Yeah, can you imagine being in that room, trying to make that call? What were the factors they were considering?
So the committee in charge of picking the target, they had a list of criteria. The city had to have military significance. They wanted a city that hadn't been heavily bombed yet so they could really see what this new weapon could do. And they wanted the impact to be, well, they wanted it to be so devastating that Japan would have no choice but to surrender, end the war. And you know what city was at the top of their list?
I'm guessing Kyoto. The very city Stimson visited and loved all those years ago.
Bingo. It ticked all the boxes, perfect target.
Wow.
But here's where Stimson's personal experience comes back. Remember that vacation? He was totally against bombing Kyoto. He said destroying a place like that with its culture, its history, it would be a terrible loss. Not just for Japan, but for the whole world.
I mean, can you imagine? Your favorite vacation spot is suddenly on the list to be bombed.
Crazy, right? So it's incredible to think that a vacation, a personal fondness for a city, might have saved Kyoto from being destroyed. It's the perfect example of how seemingly unimportant moments in our lives can have these ripple effects. We just never know.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If Stimson hadn't taken that trip, would he have felt the same way? Would he have fought so hard to save Kyoto?
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe Kyoto would have been the first target, forever changing its fate and maybe even shaping the entire post-war world in a completely different way. Scary to think about.
Absolutely. But if Kyoto was off the table, then how did they end up choosing Hiroshima?
Well, good question. The committee, they had a list of backup targets, and Hiroshima was on that list. It was a major military and industrial center, so it fit the criteria.
So in ways, Stimson saving Kyoto inadvertently led to Hiroshima being destroyed.
It's a tough reality, isn't it?
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's a complicated story, and it makes you think about, the consequences, intended and unintended, of even the best intentions. It's a powerful reminder that even in war, when decisions have to be made fast, under pressure, individual choices, even things from your past, they can have a huge impact.
I've never thought about history that way before. It's really making me rethink things.
Me too. It definitely challenges the way we usually look at things, right? Like this idea that history just marches along in a straight line. This whole idea of flukes really makes things a lot more complex and nuanced.
It's a good reminder that things are rarely as simple as they seem, right?
Right. So, okay, we've gone from forests to cigars to the atomic bomb.
Right.
A lot to process.
That's a lot. Makes you think.
Right. It really does. And we're not done yet.
There's more.
We've got one more historical fluke to unpack, and this one hits a little closer to home for many of us. We're going to dig into 9/11 and the mission to kill Osama bin Laden. We'll explore how, even with such a carefully planned operation, chance still played a role, shaping things in ways no one could have predicted.
Wow, okay. I'm ready.
Stay tuned, because after the break, we're going to continue this deep dive into the fascinating world of historical flukes and their impact on everything. Man, some of those stories about how these little things, these chance encounters can shape huge events. It's incredible.
It really changes how you look at history, doesn't it? Like, it's
Yeah.
not always this straight line from A to B.
Definitely. And now we're moving on to something much more recent, something a lot of us probably remember pretty vividly. 9/11.
Yeah.
A day seared into our memories, and a day filled with countless stories of, near misses, incredible coincidences, those things that determined who lived and who died. It's heavy stuff.
Absolutely. And while we can't go into all those personal stories, it's important to acknowledge, just how much chance and circumstance played a role on that day.
Yeah.
But what we can look at, I think, is how this whole idea of flukes, how it kept influencing things even after 9/11, especially in the planning and the raid that killed Osama bin Laden.
That raid was huge, a turning point in the war on terror. But, like Brian Klaas points out in his book, Fluke, it was also an operation full of uncertainty, full of risk. I mean, they didn't even know for sure if bin Laden was in that compound in Abbottabad.
Right. They had good intel, but there's always a chance, right? A chance of a mistake, a miscalculation. It could have gone wrong so easily.
And the stakes were so high if the raid had failed.
Yeah. It could have emboldened al-Qaeda, made the U.S. look weak on the world stage, maybe even led to more terrorism. It's hard to even think about.
It is. It really is. And it wasn't just about geopolitics, right? There's the human element, too, all the people involved.
Oh, absolutely. Think about Obama. The night of the raid, he's at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, making jokes, trying to act like everything's normal.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, this team of Navy SEALs is gearing up for one of the most dangerous missions ever.
It's wild. I mean, you've got this lighthearted dinner, and at the same time, this super tense life or death mission going on. The pressure Obama must have been under.
Unbelievable. And then on top of all that, there's that near disaster during the raid itself. You remember? The helicopter crash?
Oh, yeah, inside the compound. That could have ended the whole mission right there.
Easily. Hostage situation, international incident. Who knows what could have happened?
Right. If Pakistani forces had gotten involved, I mean, it could have escalated so quickly. Diplomatic crisis, military confrontation.
The potential for things to go south was huge. But even with all that uncertainty with the helicopter crash, the raid worked. They got bin Laden. They achieved their objective.
It's a testament to the skill of those SEALs, no doubt. But part of me wonders, was it luck? Did fate play a role? I mean, things could have gone so differently.
Yeah. That's a question that will probably be debated for a long time. What's clear, though, is that the raid, even 9/11 itself, they show us how random stuff, chance encounters, unforeseen things, the decisions people make, it all comes together to shape history.
Listening to all this, talking about these historical flukes, it makes you wonder, do we have as much control over our lives as we think? Are we just at the mercy of random events?
That's a big question, right?
Yeah.
And it's something Klaas wrestles with in his book. He says, yeah, we can't predict or control every little thing in our lives, But we can choose how we respond to those unexpected moments, how we deal with chaos, with uncertainty, how we make meaning out of the randomness, the things that happen to us.
So it's not about just giving up saying, well, I have no control, so why bother? It's more about like recognizing that, yeah, there are things we can't control
Mhm.
and focusing on how we adapt, how we learn, how we make the best of whatever situation we find ourselves in.
That's it. Exactly. Embracing the unknown, being open to new experiences,
Hmm.
and taking action, even when you don't know for sure what's going to happen. Who knows? Maybe that chance encounter, that detour you weren't expecting, it leads to something amazing.
I like that. That's actually pretty empowering. So maybe instead of getting stuck in the what ifs, we should focus on making the most of whatever comes our way, even if it's a surprise, even if it's
Yeah,
not part of the plan.
I agree. 100%. We can't control everything, but we can control how we react, how we respond to the challenges and the opportunities that life throws at us. And who knows? Maybe those choices we make, even the ones that seem small, insignificant, they end up shaping the future in ways we can't even imagine.
Wow. This whole conversation, this whole deep dive, it's really changed how I think about things. I used to think of history as this like fixed thing, something that already happened, unchangeable. But now I see it as more fluid, more dynamic. And that makes me think about my own life that way too.
That's a powerful realization, I think. Recognizing how chance shapes things, our own lives, and the big events of history. It helps us to be more present, more mindful of the choices we're making, and more open to what each moment might bring.
It's like, oh, weight's been lifted. Instead of trying to control everything, I can just like relax into the uncertainty, knowing that even my smallest actions could have these ripple effects. It's kind of freeing.
It is. It's beautiful. This idea that we're all part of this big interconnected web. We're constantly shaping the world around us and being shaped by it at the same time. It's amazing.
I'm going to try to remember that as I go through my day. Who knows what historical flukes I might run into? Maybe I'll bump into someone who changes my life, or maybe I'll just have a really good cup of coffee. Whatever happens, I'm ready for it.
That's the spirit. Just be open, be curious, and be ready for whatever life throws your way. Good or bad, expected or unexpected. That's all we can do.
This has been a really incredible deep dive. Thanks for sharing these stories. It's helped me to see history and my own life in a whole new way.
You got it. It's been a pleasure. And to everyone listening, the next time you miss your bus or you have a chance meeting with someone, remember, you might be seeing a historical fluke in action.
And hey, you might even be creating one. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. It's crazy to think, like just a shortage of trees, a
Yeah.
box of cigars, a vacation. Those things could have such a huge impact on history.
Right. Makes you wonder what other, little things have shaped the world we live in.
Yeah. And at first I thought, flukes are just these big dramatic events. But Kless, he's saying they happen all the time, constantly shaping and reshaping everything.
Yeah. It's like this whole hidden layer of complexity, always working behind the scenes, like walking through a minefield of what ifs. Every decision we make, every person we meet, it could send us down a totally different path.
So does that mean we're like less in control of our own lives than we think?
Good question. Something people have been debating forever, right? But instead of seeing it as, I don't know, like a threat to our free will or something, maybe we can see it as potential, like opening up possibilities.
I don't know if I get it. How can less control be a good thing?
Well, if history is so sensitive to these, random events, it means even small actions can make a difference. We all have the power to change things, even if we don't realize it.
So we shouldn't get hung up on planning every little detail because there's always going to be that random factor.
Exactly. It's about embracing the unknown, trying new things, and doing something, even when you don't know what'll happen. Who knows? Maybe that chance encounter, that wrong turn, leads to something amazing.
This whole deep dive has really changed my perspective. I used to think history was just like a fixed story, something that already happened, we can't change it. Now I see it's way more fluid, and that makes me look at my own life differently too.
I think that's a really important realization. Recognizing that chance plays a role in our lives and in history.
Mhm.
It makes us more mindful, you know, more aware of our choices, and more open to the possibilities in each moment.
Yeah. It's like taking a deep breath, relaxing into the uncertainty instead of trying to control everything, knowing that even the smallest things can have big ripple effects. It's freeing.
It is. It's this beautiful idea that we're all connected. We're all shaping the world and being shaped by it. It's incredible.
I'm going to try and remember that today as I go about my day. Who knows what kind of flukes are out there waiting for me? Maybe a life-changing opportunity or just a really good cup of coffee. I'm ready for it.
That's the attitude. Be open, be be curious, and be ready for whatever life throws at you. That's all you can do.
This has been an awesome deep dive. Thanks for sharing these stories and helping us see history and our own lives in a new way.
Anytime. And for everyone listening, next time you miss your bus or have a random chat with someone, remember, maybe you're seeing a historical fluke right before your eyes.
Or maybe you're starting one yourself. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.